Sure everybody out there by now, it's been out for a week or so, has seen the Belichick Dabo interview that Reese Davis did on the ESPN YouTube page or wherever it was posted. George, your thoughts on this interview? It was a very lengthy one. An hour and a half, I think, was the total time for the interview. They talked about everything from, um, you know, recruiting to ties that they've had and people that they've worked with, and them not really having a relationship and knowing each other, to things that they look for in certain players, to philosophy on continued success and consistency, all the way to book writing and all this other stuff. So they went into a myriad of different issues. But what was your just overall general thoughts on the interview? I thought it was really interesting. Kind of Dabo, Swinney, and Bill Belichick go back and forth. Bill at one time was like, "Hey Reese, can I ask some questions?" And he had a few questions for Dabo, which I thought was pretty funny, and kind of made the interview a little bit more fun. But Bill in that interview, now make no mistake, I don't make a habit of going out there watching a bunch of Bill Belichick interviews. So far be it for me to be like some expert on how he typically is in interviews, but he seemed like a pretty cool guy in the interview. Lighthearted, laughed a lot, smiled a lot, cracked some jokes. Overall, I thought it was really cool just to watch two coaches of that caliber. Obviously, Bill Belichick being arguably the greatest NFL coach of all time with all the Super Bowls that he has, and then transferring down into college, and Dabo Swinney with his multiple national championships in college, and them talking about coaches that influenced them and their pedigree. So, what were your thoughts on the interview, and kind of what stood out to you?
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was pretty insightful. I thought Reese Davis did a good job with kind of teeing him up, and he just kind of let him go. I don't remember him talking all that much. It was
Right.
kind of it kind of turned into a back and forth, especially after the first couple of questions. So that was cool. It just felt like a conversation, and that was nice. But yeah, they hit on a lot of different things. I mean, you know, obviously as Clemson fans, a lot of the stuff Dabo said was not new stuff that we hadn't heard before. So we definitely already get his philosophy and his understandings and ideas on things. So it was cool to hear Bill kind of bounce off of that and give his own takes. Um, you know, I thought one of the things that was really interesting with Bill was kind of his um, kind of the how he goes about uh, how he applies his knowledge, when it comes to like the people that are around him. One of the things he said was like, I don't really try to mentor, other coaches. Like, I thought that was interesting because like a guy with, that kind of, that level of experience and that level of success, you would think, okay, they're going to be guys that they come up to him and ask him stuff all the time, and he's going to want to
Right.
impart his knowledge onto those guys. But he said, I don't really do that. He said, he's like, yeah, if I see something that maybe somebody could be doing a little bit better, I'll let them know. But like I'm not like in the mentor type. I don't consider myself that kind of guy. And he's like, because I feel like I'm still learning. And I thought that was interesting. That was a
Yeah.
I didn't expect to hear that perspective from him because I definitely think from Dabo standpoint, he definitely takes coaches under his wing and tries to be a mentor.
Right.
But they both came at it from an understanding that they both were still learning, and that you're like one of the things that you have to in order to be as successful as you are and continue to be as successful as you are is you have to keep learning and know that you don't know everything. So I thought that was an interesting part of the interview. They touched on a lot of different things just as far as coaching philosophy that was really interesting, and they had some. My favorite part was Dabo explaining BYOG and the Roy bus. So that
That
was
was hilarious. That was hilarious that those were the questions that Bill Belichick wanted to be answered by Dabo. He kind of hijacked the interview at that point and was like, "Where did that come from?" So it was kind of fun to listen, yeah, to the story that Dabo told about, where it came from. Much like most of Dabo's quotes, it's just like he's in the moment and he says something and it just sticks.
Yeah, it was funny. Bill, like when he said who his favorite player that he scouted from Clemson, then that it was Christian Wilkins. I was like, oh, that's not surprising.
Yeah.
So it was cool to just kind of having those two, like, even though they didn't have many prior connections, and that, like, he had only been to Clemson like one time, that they were able to talk about, so because they just had so many shared experiences, and even though they had like different backgrounds and stuff, and they were talking about the coaches that they learned from. Dabo, of course, learned under Gene Stallings when he was a graduate assistant, and Bill Belichick, he learned over a myriad of different coaches, but started under Lou Holtz, and of course he was all over the place, but it was cool kind of seeing how those two go about doing things, and there was clearly a good amount of respect for each other, even though I would definitely consider them very different coaches in terms of style and
Oh
philosophy.
yeah. I think they are vastly different coaches, and kind of their just the way they conduct themselves, the way they go about things, but have a lot of the same principles at the same time. You kind of hear them talk about long-term success and what it takes, and you mentioned being a lifelong learner and all of those things, and just you hear Dabo talk about you have to have a conviction and a vision that you believe in, and that there's a balance between. I like that Reese Davis kind of asked Dabo an interesting question, and I really like the answer that he gave. He was kind of asking, how do you go about adapting in today's college football? When you have hard and fast things that you believe in for your program, and kind of Dabo went on to say that, one, you got to have a conviction, right, and a vision for your program, and you don't necessarily compromise that, right? But you're always learning things, you're always adjusting things, but you stay steadfast in the kind of core things for your program, and that kind of carries you through. So I thought that was pretty interesting. And then the connections that they have with coaches that they've kind of been around was super interesting as well.
Yeah, absolutely, and it was just kind of cool hearing especially their upbringing, and kind of how it shaped what they, how they became coaches, and how they went about like their coaching philosophy, and what they valued. So that was cool.
Yeah, it was really cool. One of the other things that kind of stood out to me was when Dabo was talking about Gene Stallings and kind of the impact that he had on his career, and how he felt like he had met Bear Bryant, right, because of the interactions and the 7 years that he had, serving under Gene Stallings and those kind of things. So it's always interesting to hear like how these coaches are molded, right, when they're young, right? Because Dabo's told the story before about how he didn't want to get into coaching, and Gene Stallings was basically like, "Well, you're going to be my grad assistant, and you're going to get your master's degree. So I don't know what to tell you."
Yep.
Which is really funny.
Yeah.
Something to work out that way, and then to find out that it's your true calling, if you will, is really cool. So. Yeah, man. It was a pretty cool interview, I think. Super informative, I think, of just kind of getting a feel for Bill Belichick. I don't know a ton about Bill Belichick. I'm not like an avid follower, of coaches in the NFL or anything like that, right? Like I follow players, I follow careers and stuff like that. But I'm not. I don't dive in deep like I do in college football. So it was kind of cool to see like an hour and a half long, just open format interview. I think Reese Davis did a great job of just letting them two talk, to your point. And you kind of just saw kind kind of a little bit of who they are. We already know who Dabo is. Obviously, we're Clemson fans, but it was kind of cool to see Bill Belichick in a little bit more like unstructured interview setting, where he was just kind of like storytelling and they were feeding off each other. So I enjoyed it. It was a great watch. If you guys haven't seen it, should definitely go check it out.
Yeah, that definitely the most, the most energy I've heard out of Bill Belichick in an interview.
Right.
Because his post game interview when he was in the NFL is,
We snapped the ball and Brady threw a touchdown and the game was over. So but the other guy missed the tackle, so it wasn't great.
Yeah,
It's like,
that was great.
What'd you say, Bill? That's what I know of Bill Belichick.
Yeah.
Like little short clips like that, and I'm like, bro, how does the media even talk to this guy right now? What are we doing? So to see him in that format, it was like, oh, okay. I guess he does have a little bit of energy and personality in there somewhere. Maybe he doesn't show it a lot, but it's in there.
Yeah.
Leave it to Dabo to pull Bill Belichick out and make him a little bit more energetic for an interview.
Yeah. It was definitely the most engaged I've ever seen him.
Yeah.
So that was cool.